Good morning. Today is May 14th, in the year 2020. It is a Thursday, and it is my mother's birthday. Happy birthday, Mama. Today we're going to continue our look at the life of Abraham in Genesis. We are going to be starting in chapter 20, but I want you to keep your thumb back on chapter 12, or go back and review our first account of Abraham, because that is going to be relevant in what we're going to be discussing first. Now, I had debated about whether or not to read this at all, but I have come to the conclusion that it is important for us to read it so that we can compare it to what the other chapter said. Chapter 20. Now Abraham moved from there into the region of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. For a while he stayed at Gerar, and there Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister." Then Abimelech, the king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. Now you should already be picking up that this is very similar to the story in chapter 12, where Abraham told Sarah, "Tell everybody you're my sister," while we were in Egypt. And at this point, Sarah is over 100 years old in the narrative. Must have been an amazing woman. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, "You are as good as dead, because the woman you have taken, she is a married woman." Now Abimelech had not gone near her, so he said, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Did he not say to me, 'She is my sister,' and didn't she also say, 'He is my brother'? I have done this with a clear conscience and clean hands." God said to him in a dream, "Yes, I know that you did this with a clear conscience, and so I have kept you from sinning against her. This is why I did not let you touch her. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, you may be sure that you and all that is yours will die." Early next morning, Abimelech summoned all of his officials, and when he told them all that had happened, they were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said, "What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that should not be done." And Abimelech asked Abraham, "What was your reason for doing this?" Abraham replied, "I said to myself, 'This is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. She really is my sister and daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife.' And when God had me wander from my father's household, I said to her, 'This is how you can show your love to me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother.' And Abimelech brought sheep and cattle and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham. And he returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, 'My land is before you. Live wherever you like.' To Sarah he said, 'I have given your brother 1,000 shekels of silver. This is to cover the offense against you. Before all who are with you, you are completely vindicated.' And Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his slave girls, so they could have children again. For the Lord had closed up every womb in Abimelech's household because of Abraham's wife, Sarah." All right. A lot more detail in this story than the one that we have in chapter 12 with Pharaoh. But the basics are the same. Abraham, fearing for his life, puts out that Sarah is his sister, not his wife. This causes the king of the land to take Sarah for his own. God appears to the king in a dream and says, "She's a married woman." The king pays off Abraham to get out of the sin. It is essentially the same story. And while Abraham comes off better from it financially, it's again a demonstration that he lacks faith in God to protect him. He has his schemes, his plans, and it is only by the grace of God that they prosper. But Abraham is failing at his essential task to demonstrate that he believes God will really protect him and keep him. Chapter 21. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age. The very time God had promised him, Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, as God commanded. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Okay, again, the blessing of seed is the fulfillment of the covenant on God's part. So we have God keeping his word, but Abraham still not sure what's going on. The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. You can just hear it. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. God said to him, do not be so distressed about the boy and your maidservant. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the maidservant into a nation also, because he is your offspring. Early next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar, set them on her shoulders, and sent her off with the boy. She went her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. She went off and sat down nearby, about to bowshot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. As she sat there nearby, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him a great nation. God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy to drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert, became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. All right. Again, Abraham is a horrible person. That he would send Hagar off with a packed lunch into the desert with a child. I am not sure exactly how old, but less than 12, or he wouldn't be called a child. But God takes care of him. We get in these stories a lot more explanation as to how the nations that the ancient Israelites dealt with were formed and why there's various kinds of animosity between them than we do a lot about the nature of God. The rest of chapter 21 deals with a treaty between Abraham and Abimelech, uh, and Phicol, a commander of armies from the Philistines. Um, it doesn't have a lot of teaching matter in it. So this is going to be one of the places where we're going to skip down a little bit and spend the rest of our time on this first half of chapter 22, one of the most famous stories, quite possibly one of the most famous stories, period. Whether it is this version or the one that's slightly different in the Quran, this story is foundational to the faith of half the population of the planet. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. Okay, it is clear from the beginning this is a test. He said to Abraham, he said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. God said, take your son, your only son Isaac, okay, not his only son, but the one he's got, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. Early next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set off in the place God had told him about. The third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey, while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. He himself carried the fire and the knife. The 2 of them went on together. Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Abraham, Father, yes, my son? Abraham replied, the fire and wood are here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham said, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. The 2 of them went on together. Okay. Let's just deal with some of this. Is this a record of human sacrifice practiced? I don't think so. In fact, I think that ultimately this story is a condemnation of human sacrifice. It is a weird thing for God to do. So I tend to see this story much more as a parable than as historical. I know that for some of you is difficult to accept. But that to me is more tolerable than believing God would tell someone to kill their own child. I don't think that's something God does. Now, even as a storyteller, you see this and wonder how Abraham would have reacted to his son who is carrying the wood on his back to, where is the lamb? Abraham responds correctly by saying God will provide the lamb. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood, as if it would be that easy. My youngest would have been 12 miles away by the point that I was going to try to put her on the altar. He reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there was a thicket. He saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on that mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies. Through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. And Abraham returned to his servants. They went off for Beersheba. Abraham stayed at Beersheba. As I said, this is a difficult passage. But I think there is an intrinsic kind of lesson here. And it is not that we should be willing to even sacrifice our children. But it is that if God calls for something we deem of utmost importance, we must trust him that what is good will happen. You think that, well, that's a fine line. I don't really think it is. I think about this as a parent and as a child. My parents had enough faith that when I said I was going to go to Ukraine, well, I was in my 20s and they couldn't stop me, but they supported it because they believed that if I was following God's will, the best thing would happen. It also means that when I felt called to come here, I was willing to move my family from a place they really liked, a good school where my children were happy, resources and family. I was willing to risk that because I believed it was what God was calling me to do. I think those are better analogies to God asking you to kill one of your children. It is a question of risk and faith. It is the same thing that Abraham has been struggling with all along. It is the idea that God says, follow me, and doesn't tell us where he's going. The belief that God says, give me your life, and we don't know what he's going to do with it. If we have faith in God, if that faith is all-consuming, that doesn't mean we do stupid things. I would classify, picking up poisonous snakes as a stupid thing. Taking unnecessary risks. But what we believe is that when we have earnestly, carefully sought the will of God, we have prayed, we have searched Scripture, we have talked to our brothers and sisters in Christ, we have meditated on it, that if we really believe God has called us to do something, We do it not caring about the outcome, knowing that at times people do die, that we might die, that we might lose a great deal, but not judging something based on the outcome, but based on whether or not we are following our call. I encourage you to struggle with this story, to not simply go, oh, and make yourself feel better. It's okay. I think this is hard, and it is something that is worth you dealing with. Now, next time we will pick up in chapter 23. The last bit of 22 is simply a list of Abraham's brother's children. So we're not going to worry about that too much. I'm not even going to read it. And so we'll pick up in 23 and pretty much wrap up the story of Abraham and move on into Isaac. Until then, may God keep you healthy, safe, and whole. And I encourage you on your struggles, looking for answers in the question of faith. They are worth the effort.